Welcome, folks, to episode 1 of the Vermont Outdoors podcast. I'm here with Mr. Scott and Mr. Chris Bates from Outdoor Secrets Unwrapped Trout Fishing Adventures. How are you doing, Chris?
Thanks for having me. It's kind of, you're breaking up a little bit, but thanks for having me. It's going to be a fun little podcast. I'm excited to talk with you.
I'm excited to talk with you too, Chris. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and
Sure.
what you do?
Sure. I'm a Midwesterner. I came to Vermont in 2012. I brought my TV show. It was called From the Outdoors to the Kitchen. And when I came here, we switched it up to Outdoor Secrets Unwrapped. We were on WBTN for 8 years, and we are currently with Cat TV since 2015, I believe, for TV shows as well. So for mostly the outdoors.
Let's see. Do you have any fishing stories?
Yeah, I got all kinds of them. There's so many that I could go with, but I'll give one that's kind of an interesting story. So I was fishing in the Walloomsac down by the Paper Mill Bridge, right? And there's this really nice fishing hole. And so I'm fishing, and it's loaded with brown trout. I was having a blast catching these brown trout. So I'm fishing, and all of a sudden I felt this little tap, 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 right? And I said, oh, cool, I got a brown trout. So I'm reeling it in, and all of a sudden my rod just jerked like I was snagged. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? So as I'm trying to film it and reel it at the same time, I see the eyes clamped on to the brown trout on its back. And I'm like, what the heck is this? So I'm getting really close, and I'm like, oh boy, here we go. And it was a pickerel in the river grabbed onto my brown trout. And I was like, no one's going to believe this. So I'm running film, right? And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I'm going for the net. And as I was going to net it, it took a big chunk out of the brown trout's back and swam off. And I'm like, what the heck is a pickerel doing in the river? Because normally you don't find those ever in the river. So the only thing I can think of is it's either got loose from Lake Perrin and it went down through Perrin Creek, or that somebody just released it into it. But what a thing. I was like, holy cow, I got something big, and I was like, darn.
How big
I got the footage of it, so it's pretty good.
Oh, maybe you should show us sometime. How big was this pickerel?
I'm going to say about 20 inches.
Oh,
it was
geez.
a good-sized pickerel.
That is big, yeah. Especially in a river when you're just catching little browns.
Yeah, exactly.
So Anthony, now that we jumped in with a really solid, fun intro to the podcast, do you want to tell us what kinds of things we have in store for the podcast today?
So in store, we have fishing stories. We have talking about gear, and then we have fishing tips.
Yeah, so that's good. Lots of good stuff. Stories, fishing gear, and fishing tips, just in case any mics are cutting out here, because we're happy to be able to use Zoom to connect together from different locations. So this is really cool.
And Zoom doesn't always 100% work.
Or it could be Comcast Wi-Fi.
So, Chris, do you have any short fishing stories?
A short fishing story? Yeah, I have a short fishing story.
So any short fish that you caught, Yeah,
the little 6-inch fish that you find, right? By the way, I've
never a bluegill size story.
What is that?
A bluegill size story?
Yeah, I do. So I'm fishing the Walloomsac again, right? And I always talk about safety, and safety is very important, right? So I was going by a spot that I usually fish on River Road down by the treatment plant, right? So I see this silver car off to the side. I was like, ah, darn it, someone's in that spot. So I just kept going up the river road and pulled over, fished for a couple hours. I came back and I saw that same car there, correct? And I was like, well, that's weird. Anybody who's a trout fisherman knows that they river hop, right? So you're always going to different places really quick. So I go out there and I see this guy standing in the water with his rod tucked under his arm. And I go, hey, how's fishing going? He goes, oh, thank God somebody showed up. And the water was really cold and high and it was splashing into his thigh. So the guy was really cold. And I look over and I said, oh, you fell between the two boulders that are out there, right? And he said, yeah, I was trying to step up on him and he got his foot wedged between the two rocks and there's no leverage to get out. So I was like, well, where's your cell phone? He goes, in my car. I said, well, that's a nice place for it. And I said, did you tell anybody where you're at? Nope. And I'm like, what a buffoon, right? So I said, hold on, I'll go get you out. So I walk over to him. And as simple as it was, all he had to do was put his hand on my shoulder and pick his foot up and he was out. So, you know,
that traction, right?
Yeah. One of the things though, it's very important that, you know, safety is a must, even in these little rivers and streams. You gotta be safe. So that was a cool little thing that I was like, wow, that's interesting. So imagine how long you would have been there if I didn't show up.
Yeah, I mean, if it's like towards the evening and it's starting to get dark, the guy could have been out there all night, and who knows if he would have made it through the night.
Right.
I mean,
Hypothermia
honestly.
probably would have set in because the water was cold. It was in October. So,
And oh, geez, yeah. So the water could be what? 40?
40s, upper 40s. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that could definitely cause hypothermia fast, and the air temp is cold too. So, how old do you think the guy was?
What was that?
How old do you think he
Oh,
was?
he was, I would say he was in his 40s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was picturing kind of like an elderly guy, you know?
No, in his 40s. You know, a lot of people just, you know, they're reckless. Whenever you're in the outdoors, people are very reckless and they're like, oh, nothing's going to happen to me. Well, lo and behold, something happened.
Don't mind the school bell ringing. So I got to ask, was he a fly fisherman?
He was. He was a fly.
Of course. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No. And, you know, I was like, why didn't you just put your rod down in the water? And I asked him that, right? He goes, well, that's a $700 reel. I'm like, oh, brother.
I guess it's a $400 life. Is he saying one's less?
Exactly. So you see all kinds of stuff when you're out.
You know what? I've actually got a story of my own.
Well, let's hear it.
I actually think about this. Yeah, I think about this story all the time. So I was fishing at Lake Perrin, and I had a floating lure. It was a big lure. It was shaped like a fish. It had 2 hooks on each end. I ended up tying it onto my line, and I went to cast it out at Lake Perrin. Let's just say when I cast it out, I saw my line end, and my lure continued to fly. I thought my string was still connected to the lure. No. Instead, that perfectly good cast just sent a perfectly good lure gone halfway across Byron.
That happens.
Yeah, so you're like, man, that was a great. Oh man, now I've got to go buy some more gear, right?
That was my $12 favorite Rapala. Darn it.
Yep.
And it was my favorite lure too. So I sat there for like 10 minutes. I'm thinking, do I swim to get it? Do I not swim to get it? No, I'm not going to swim to get it.
Yeah, good luck.
No, that's right.
That. How much do you think that thing cost?
$10.
Yeah, that's $10 you're never going to see again.
Nope.
Nope, absolutely.
And I'm pretty sure it's still flowing in Lake Perrin. Happens to the best of us.
It does.
All right. I'm sure we could always tell stories all day, but let's get into some talk about some gear.
Okay. All right. What do you want to know?
Anything you know about gear?
All right. So coming from the Midwest, I learned very quickly that I had the wrong equipment. And in the Midwest, we use a lot of bigger stuff, 6.5-foot rods, 10-pound test line. We use bigger lures because everything in the Midwest is big. And so I had my heart set on catching trout. I was like really excited because in the Midwest, we don't get a chance to catch trout like we do out here in Vermont. So I was very fortunate to meet up with some people that showed me how to do it. So after all these years now catching trout, some of the things now, I'm a spin cast guy. I mean, I do fly fish, but I don't find it as exciting to fly fish for trout as I do with my ultralight 4'6" rod or my 5'6" rod. So, and besides that, the canopies where I fish, the canopies are quite low. So you wouldn't be able to get your 5-weight or a 6-weight rod in where I go fishing. So you need something really small. So, you know, I use razor rods. They are very good. They're composite rods. They're very sensitive. And that's one of the things that's really important is you want a sensitive rod for trout fishing because you have a very little tap, tap, tap type feel to when a fish is attacking the bait or the lure. So you want that. Reels, I'm kind of partial to high-end reels because I believe that the gear ratio on them are very important when you're fishing in fast-moving water. So the gear ratio is able to get a spinner through or a little dace minnow lure, you know, through the water. Also, your line is very important. So depending on what fish you're targeting, you're going to want to use a little bit thicker line, heavier weight line. So I have a 6-pound that I use for brown trout because their teeth are like razor sharp. And once they nick the line, you got to strip off a little bit to retie up. So brook trout, not so much. I'm not worried about, or rainbows. I usually use 4-pound test line, which is excellent. And if you've ever fought a 12-inch fish on ultralight rod and reel, it is exciting. It's like, holy cow, I got a big one. It's a monster. You bring it up, it's 12 inches, but it's still a fun fight. So, and then terminal tackle. I always carry a box of hooks and weights and my lures. I'm very partial to Yozuri dace minnow lures because in the river, we have both species of dace minnows. We have the red and black and the green and black. So the brown trout love eating those. So those are always good. Zeros, 1s and 2s for spinners. Panther Martins are really good, as well as the Meps. No bucktail on them. They just like regular shine. And I've also found that it's very important to have waders and sunglasses. And if you have sunglasses, the tint should always be brown or rose color. Because if you have gray or blue tint on your sunglasses, you can't cut through the water to see what's on the bottom of these rivers. So if you have brown or rose, you can see right to the bottom of the river, so you can see what you're walking on. And it's very important to do that.
I will think about that the next time I go to get a pair of sunglasses for fishing.
Right, because we have gravel bottoms, and gravel bottoms are brown, and the water is more on the brown side. I mean, there are places that are very clear, but you should always have sunglasses to cut the glare anyway off the water, because, you know, a lot of times you'll sight fish for trout and they'll sit under the banks, and you can see them literally sitting under the banks. So you're going to want a good pair of sunglasses, a good pair of waders, regardless of whether the water is 12 inches deep or 36 inches deep. You want a good pair of waders.
Yeah. And going back to something, if you don't mind, you were talking about the rod and the line. So one thing I really like how you mentioned like lightweight line and kind of a lightweight rod.
Right.
You can feel things much easier that way. So if you have a rod that allows you to feel whatever's happening on the end, it's a lot better. You're not going to use a super heavy duty line or rod, and you want the two of those to match as well. So
That's
when a
correct.
fish is just kind of picking at your bait, you can actually tell. Otherwise, even just the the stream and other things can kind of throw you off a little bit if you don't have
Right. And here's something really too that's very important is that I have 2 rods set up. I always bring 2 rods, and I use what's called a locator bait, which is actually a red worm. So I use a red worm on a number 6 octopus hook with 2 little split shots about 12 inches high. If I catch a fish on a red worm, I know that there's fish there. So then that gives me the opportunity to try out all these other lures and spinners that I have, because they'll attack those as well. And it's very important that you try that first, because a lot of times people go into rivers and streams blind and they can't figure out, well, why can't I catch anything? Well, first you got to know if there's any fish there, and that's why you always carry some red worms. Always, they'll always eat a red worm, whether it's a brook trout, a rainbow trout, or a brown trout. They'll always go after that.
And you mentioned having 2 lines or two full setups.
Right.
So I think that's a great idea because when we've gone fishing together, it definitely happens where you snag, you break your line, you lose
Yep.
your hook, and instead of trying to like fight the water and get everything strung up and fixed, it's great to have a backup so you can just hook it up, throw it out, and keep fishing.
Right.
Or one person can keep doing the bait while the other one's fishing.
Exactly. And then there's one other very, very, very important thing. When people miss fish, they feel the tap, 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 and they go to set the hook. There's two things. One, you never set the hook up straight. You always set it sideways, because a trout attacks the fish from a side. If you go to set the hook straight up, it's out the mouth. You're going to miss the fish. Number 2, you have to make sure that you change your hooks all the time, because in the river, whether it's a lure or you're just fishing single hook fishing, the water dulls the hook tips.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when you go to set a fish hook into a fish, a lot of times you'll lose it because it's not sharp. It may be sharp to us, but it's not sharp to the bony mouth of a trout.
Yeah, and you want to respect the fish too.
Right.
Like if you're trying to set them with dull hooks, you're going to kind of abuse the fish and
Exactly.
stress it out. But if you have a nice sharp hook, you're also causing less damage to the fish for catch and release too.
That's correct. Absolutely.
When you talk, so Anthony and I understand what you're saying, but for those listening or watching that don't quite know what you mean by setting the hook, for example, can you just explain that and kind of show it to us? You don't have to use a rod, but
right. So when you feel the tap, 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 that is a sure telltale sign of a trout attacking your bait. Okay. When you set it, you're going to want to, when you're reeling, you reel side, kind of, your rod is low. You want your rod low to keep the bait low, because a lot of times the bait's going to bounce the bottom, and trout are opportunistic feeders, right? They're going to wait for something to bounce by them and then they'll attack it. So you're going to want to keep your rod low and then snap sideways. So you're going to go like that. And then generally you'll hook them right on the side of the mouth.
Exactly. So yeah, Chris is saying like when you jerk like a nice smooth pull with the rod to the side, you're basically putting the hook into the fish's lip.
Right. Absolutely. Where if you're going to snap it up, more than likely you're going to miss the fish because it's not the way the fish is actually attacking the bait.
Yeah, you just pop it right out of their mouth, essentially. Like
So,
in that, I got $1, and then the guy pulls the dollar away.
Right. So think of this. Think of a lure. You got a spinner, right? And you're reeling it through the water. The fish is going to hit it from the side, not from the back, not from the front. They hit it from the side. They want to ambush their prey. So when they hit it from the side, you want to sideways. Watch a bass angler. A lot of times bass anglers set it sideways and it almost appears like they're doing it this way, but they're not. It's sideways. And then they start reeling and then they lift it up. So that's how I recommend everybody to snap it sideways, and they'll generally catch their fish.
Nice. Alrighty. Well, that is the 5-minute mark I set for that.
I thought a
category.
fish was calling you.
So,
Like, Anthony, we're waiting.
yeah, I think that was Darwin from The Little Mermaid calling me. I don't know why he's calling. Let's see. So, did we already go over fishing tips, or did we just talk about gear?
Well, that was mostly gear and tips in between, but I'll give you some tips on that.
All right.
And I prefer to talk a little bit about safety because when you're fishing a stream or a river by yourself, here's some tips. One, always let somebody know where you're going to be or where you're starting, so that if you don't come back, if let's say you slip and fall on some rock snot and you can't get up and you're stuck out there, that's, by the way, that's algae. Rock snot is algae on rocks, and it's really slippery. Even with boots on, even with wading boots or waders, it's very slippery. So
I thought
you want
rock
to
snot was fish sneezes.
yeah. So you definitely want to let somebody know where you're at all times. Number two, carry an extra battery and your cell phone, and hopefully that it's in a waterproof container. But I always carry mine in my pocket on my waders. I always have my phone right there. Carry an extra battery to charge it if you're low on it. Carry a bag. I have a backpack, a Trout backpack with all kinds of stuff in it. And carry a first aid kit, a little tiny one. They sell them at Walmart for $5. It's perfect for your backpack. You never know when you're going to get a twig whack to the eye. You're walking through something, you twist your ankle. There's all kinds of issues that can happen when you're out by yourself. So you always want to be prepared. Carry a knife with you, a flashlight, carry a lighter with you, because you never know what may happen.
Yeah.
In the evenings, or you just never know.
Yeah.
As safe as you want to be, you got to be even more prepared.
Yeah, I mean, you could twist your ankle almost like that guy got his foot wedged in the water, and you might spend a night in the woods, even if you're 100 yards from your car. You
Right.
might spend a night in the woods or even a few hours.
Right.
You mentioned a first aid kit. I've heard so many stories where people hook themselves in the face or someone else.
Yeah.
And even wearing like sunglasses or protective sunglasses that are kind of rated for minor impact is a good way to kind of keep stuff out of your eyes. And as you said, you can see the water better and you look pretty cool, right?
It's right. Yeah, and you look really cool. You look like one of those pro anglers out on the water.
Yeah, like you're in a commercial.
Yeah, there's just so many different things that could go wrong. You know, I carry extra gear with me. I carry a spool of line for both my 4-pound and 6-pound in case something happens. I carry extra reels. So these are all little tips that will make your fishing trip more enjoyable. And a lot of times people just forget, oh, I'm only going to go out for an hour. You'd be surprised what happens in 1 hour.
Yeah, and another tip is if you have a partner or a friend or someone that can go with you, they can just kind of wait in the car. If they're going to be reading at home, maybe they could read in the car on the river.
Right.
Or they could just kind of bring a lawn chair and hang out with you, bring a sandwich.
Or pictures or video.
Yeah.
You know, that's the other thing too.
Themselves and go fishing.
In what?
They could bring a rod themselves and
absolutely.
Yep. Pick up a license from the state of Vermont.
That would be the better decision in my case. Just grab a rod and let's go.
Well, we'll have to go out fishing sometime this summer.
That would be great.
Yeah, I'd love to take you. That would be great.
License first. Yeah.
Get that lifetime license. Oh, it's probably too late to get that because now it's like what, $1,000 or something. But Chris, do you want to? That's true. Do you want to just say kind of like almost like a PSA? What's the deal with the lifetime licenses for the state of Vermont?
So, you know, for me, I think it's a good deal. If you're going to be in Vermont pretty much your whole life, you know, a lot of people are buying them for their children when they're born. They buy them and then they can go use them for their lifetime. But they have 5-year licenses now, and I think that is a better choice than a lifetime. Lifetime is good for people my age, I would say, because how much longer are we going to be here? But the 5-year license is a really good deal. I think they're $137 for 5 years. And, you can do it in increments like that. So if you're going to be here 5 years, hey, it's a great deal. If you're going to be gone, after that, then it's not a good deal. So
is that a hunting fishing combo or just
no, just fishing only?
Okay. So I want to point out the lifetime license for like children or babies. There's some crazy deal. I don't remember how much I paid a few years back. My friend had a son, and for like a welcome to the world gift, I got him a lifetime license, and it was like, I want to say like $150 or something for life. You buy your tags later for like or whatever, but that's quite a deal. So now he's licensed for life, and it's a good thing for the state because that's conservation money that goes towards fishing and wildlife.
Yep, absolutely. A lot of and all in the state of Vermont, all the hunting and fishing money goes directly to Fish and Wildlife. It doesn't go to any other program here in the state of Vermont. So I think that's one of the positives of that.
Nice. So do you have any other fishing tips or safety tips?
That's about pretty good. I mean, that covers a lot of ground there for just getting the basics going. And if you want to get started in trout fishing, and also hook up with someone who knows what they're doing, because you could be led down the wrong path in trout fishing with the wrong equipment or the wrong areas to fish. Because everything in Bennington, every river, stream, creek, I don't care where you go, you're going to catch a fish. You just got to know where to go and when to go.
Yeah, and there's one thing that we chatted about. It's probably a little early to talk about it, but once summer takes off, which is about to happen really fast, there are days when it's like 90 degrees out, and sometimes the water is too warm. So there are days if the water is too warm and if it's too hot outside, you might say, oh, I'm going to cool off in the river. But those are days when it's probably best not to stress the fish because trout live in cold water.
Correct. You would be looking for dark water. It's called dark water. So you'll see rapids or ripples, and then you'll see this dark water. The fish will be in there on those days. And you're right. You don't want to really go out and catch those because what will happen is when they're stressed because of the heat, because it's really not all that cold, and they're trying to conserve their energy. And when you catch them, more than likely, if you go to release them, they will die. So if you go out on those days, you plan on keeping your fish and bringing them home.
Nice. So, Chris, I was wondering, what is the biggest trout you've caught?
Well, I didn't hear that. What was that?
The biggest trout.
So my biggest trout was a 26-inch brown trout at Paper Mill Dam.
Nice.
And my very first fish that I ever caught here in Vermont was a brook trout, and it was 13 inches.
Dang. What's like the biggest fish you've caught like ever?
Ever? I would have to say it would be the lemon shark that I caught in the Florida Keys.
How big was that?
6 feet.
If life gives you a lemon shark, did you throw it back?
Yeah. You know, and there were some big lemon sharks caught on that trip. So mine was the smallest. But it was a big fish.
Yeah, I bet you needed a big rod to bring that in.
We did. We used, I believe they were 7-foot light rods with 80-pound braided line on the reels.
Oh, that's some.
So they can't cut through it. You know, those sharks can't cut through 80-pound braided. So that was a lot of fun. And we used mutton snapper for bait. And we had to catch those. So, yeah, it was fun. It was a fun trip. And then we went tuna fishing, and then I was catching 5-pound tuna, but the tiger sharks would come up and take the tuna off the reels. It was like, I hate that.
That'd be cool video though.
I got some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got some cool video of that.
Can't hear you, Anthony.
I can't hear that. Should we just pretend we hear it?
Yep. Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, that was very good.
He's not muted.
Wonder what happened.
The word of the year. Oh, there we go. Go ahead. Anthony.
Yeah, I had no idea what you said because the audio had cut.
All right, so just repeat that whole thing for us.
I was gonna say, since we're coming to the end of the podcast, I was wondering if you had any stories you would want to tell to like close this out.
Okay, I have a good story. So I'm fishing in Minnesota with a celebrity, and I was like, this ought to be fun. We were muskie fishing, and I was like, try this stupid little lure. I didn't even know what it was called. It was no name. It was in my bag, and I was like, I'll just throw it out there. So, they always tell you to make a figure 8 while you're catching muskies, right? Because they'll follow it along, and I'm reeling it in, and I was like, oh boy, I just saw some eyes, because muskies and northern pike are called gators up there in Minnesota, right? And in Wisconsin, they call them gators. They look like alligators in the water when they're just sitting there, staying motionless, right? Their eyes are on top of their head. So I'm doing the figure 8, and I'm not thinking anything of it. A muskie comes and just yanked my pole right out of my hand, because I was like not expecting it. And I was like, well, that was that. Oops. So yeah, the rod was gone. It just took everything. I was like, darn it. So that was a fun time. Then I was fishing on the Mississippi River with a singer from a band in the Eagles. And we were catfishing for flatheads, right? Flathead catfish. And I never did that ever in my life, right? So a Bass Pro, Rocco Morari, came out, and we were in his boat. And anyway, it ended up being, we were catching these big, giant 40-pound catfish. And I was like, well, that was kind of fun. But fighting them in the river against the current, I mean, it was a fight. And I was like, wow, how exciting is that? So that was a good time, but I've had some good fishing times with a lot of different people. But trout fishing is the ticket. Small stream trout fishing. Get out and do it. Like, what was that Sega commercial? Right? Get in the game. It was great. So, yeah, trout fishing is it. So, and Vermont's loaded with trout. Bennington is loaded with trout. The whole entire state's loaded with trout, contrary to what people will say. And a lot of times people only get out once a week, once a month, once a year, but if you're out there quite a bit, you're going to have a great time catching trout here in Bennington and Bennington County.
If you're talking, Anthony, we can't hear you.
Should we just guess what he's saying?
Yeah. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, there we go. Yep, the audio keeps cutting.
All right, so it's probably about time to wrap up, Anthony.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Yeah, so that is the ending of episode 1 of Vermont Outdoors. Chris, I loved having you on the podcast. You're an awesome guest. First guest.
Well, it was great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. It's been fun.
Yep. All right. Well, make sure you get out there and enjoy the rivers.
Do you have one final thing you have to tell the viewers?
Outdoor Secrets Unwrapped. I will. Outdoor Secrets Unwrapped. Watch us on Cat TV. We have some shows on there on channel 1075. They're outdoor shows. And then Outdoor Secrets Unwrapped, Trout Angling Adventures. Check us out there too. So, all right. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for showing up.
All right.